Welcome to Dineout Insta Live. This is Sahil this side, founder at Dineout. We are starting a new series of Insta Lives at Dineout with some of our top restaurant partners. And for our first session today, we have none other than Mr. Anurag Katriar, the NRAI president and a seasoned veteran of the industry. Welcome, Anurag.
Thank you. Thank you for that lovely introduction, which makes me sound like an old daddy. Yeah, that's okay.
No, not really. So the
Yeah.
first question that I have for you, Anurag, is that considering the current situation with COVID-19 and how it has impacted the entire restaurant industry, NRAI obviously has taken some very positive sort of initiatives in terms of donating meals to the community and partnering with a lot of restaurants across the country. So if you could tell us a little bit about that initiative and what you're doing, that would be really helpful for our audience.
Some of our members are very moved with the plight of these, migrant workers, the daily wage earners who are struggling for a meal. And we realized that we have this massive infrastructure of kitchen across the cities. And all we needed was a bit of an intent and support of the government to make sure we reach out to people with the meals. And that's what we have done as we speak. I mean, we are doing about 70 odd thousand meals, 73,000 meals we did yesterday.
Wow.
By the end of the day today, for this week, we'll be crossing 500,000 meals served. And this is all happening with lots of crowdfunding. People have been generously donating to it. Well, join us, others, please donate.
Moving on to my next question, I was talking to you the other day, and you told us that you're working very closely with the finance industry, right? Finance ministry, sorry, right? It would be great if you could give us some insight into what's happening inside with the government in terms of policy making. Is there any, thought process there? Is something being developed for the industry in terms of a relief package, or do you see some new sort of processes coming for the industry in the post-COVID era? What are your, understandings over there? And if you could share that with our fellow restaurateurs and other partners.
Sure. So the first thing I like to tell everyone is there are a couple of big unknowns, which we unless we know about them, we don't even know what is the extent of damage that is being caused to us, and therefore we don't even know what is the relief we need. And the two big variables are how long is this shutdown going to last? Number one, and number two, what is the extent of damage it is going to leave us with, both in terms of human mortality as well as the economic this thing. Having said that, we needed some support from the government just to remain afloat. And that's why we had written to the Honorable Finance Minister. We had sought for, essentially, if I put it in a simple word, that spare us every single penny of cash flow that you can, so that we can take care of human needs. Now, what do I mean by human needs? Our employees, our small suppliers, which also include, some small farmers who give you potatoes, some organic vegetables, and we wanted to look at those needs. So some of the measures we had asked for included like deferment of taxes, moratorium on loans, immediate settlement of insurance claims, so on and so forth. A few things have happened. Other things are on the annual. But very clearly, these are only stopgap methods. So, what we are seeking, right, we have sought right now are measures to just remain afloat and make sure that people are not suffering. There is enough, ration in their kitchen, and the kitchen fires are burning. What we need in the longer run is much larger stimulus package. What we need is ranging from tax holidays to unemployment takeaways, because this is perhaps the biggest crisis that the world has ever seen, and we are a part of an industry which is very directly impacted by this.
Right.
And
Right.
we are an industry which employs so many people, as you said, 7+ million people. Now, if 20% job loss happens, which is a very honest possibility, that means 1.5 million Indians will lose their jobs. And add to that all the Indians who are working overseas, Middle East, cruise liners, if they come back, you're talking of huge unemployment numbers. So it's a very massive crisis, and every stakeholder needs to work together to resolve it, government being one of them.
Going on to a very different topic, which is going to be the talk of the town post-COVID era. Once we even come back to the new normal, as we call it, is something called as hygiene, right? I think this will be top of the consumer's mind and the restaurateur's mind. So how do
Yes.
you see the situation evolving both from a consumer perspective and a restaurant perspective? That what are the steps that the restaurants will need to take to, kind of do things around hygiene to build consumer confidence? Will there be steps taken with FSSAI, maybe more regulations around it? How do you see that situation evolving over time?
I think these are more to do with habits, Sahil. Once you get used to something, that's okay. I mean, and for sure, the social habits, the hygiene habits of India is changing. Today, I see even my cook at home. I mean, she uses a sanitizer after finishing a cooking, or even midway if she has to pick up another utensil, she sanitizes. So that's going to be the new normal. I'd like to take you back. After 26/11 or 9/11 before that, suddenly we had all these people wielding the metal detector and all these tests. And
Right.
we thought this is the new normal. Today, it is actually the new normal. And I think this is what is going to happen with the hygiene as well. There will be sanitizer on every dining table. There'll be sanitizer everywhere around you. And more than that, I think the awareness is going to be much more improved and evolved. You had mentioned about FSSAI. I don't think it has much to do with the government. These are your personal hygiene habits, which we need to ensure that we are facilitating at a commercial establishment like restaurants.
No, that makes total sense, right? I think we need a lot of self-regulation on that front to ensure hygiene is
Absolutely.
maintained across the board. So going on to that hygiene thought, see, the question I had in my mind is that now it is going to be a question of survival for most of the restaurant industry. So is NRI also thinking of planning some programs for the small and medium time restaurateurs to understand the post COVID era better and how to run their businesses, right? In terms of managing their costs, whether it is salary cost, rental costs. A lot of people don't even know how to manage it. So are you guys thinking at the NRAI level to figure out certain programs at the ground level so that restaurateurs can understand how to survive in this new situation? Do you think that is something which is a need of the hour or not even needed? What are your thoughts on that?
No, no, it's 100% the need of the hour. I think the situation is far more grim than what you are painting it to be.
Right.
I personally feel there'll be lots of failures. We need to all reimagine our business. It's not going to be the same world that we'll wake up to in the post-COVID era. It's going to be a new world with new habits, new challenges, and new turmoils. As a responsible body, we are going to be ready. We are ready to offer every help. In fact, NRAI Youth Committee is doing these Insta shows every day with somebody or the other. But again, I mean, what do we need to do? Will again depend on what is the level of the damage. But two
Right.
things are very, very clear. That you need to become very frugal in the post-COVID era. You need to shun all the what I call the beyond nuts and bolts, the decorative things that you did for your business. You need to let go of them. Become very frugal. Uh, Apart from that, I think you also need to think of a business which is asset light and low risk. I think the whole narrative will change more towards let us de-risk ourselves against losses, then let's maximize the profit. That was the norm till a month or two ago. I
Right.
think we
Right.
are
Right.
moving to a defensive world, and rightly so, because we are going through one of the worst crises the world has ever seen.
So going by that point, you mentioned asset light models and asset risk, less risk sort of models. So do you see delivery and takeaway as a category kind of emerging even more strongly than ever before? Traditionally, for example, even takeaway has been a kind of a lower percentage share compared to other economies like the US and the Southeast Asia, in India, right? So for example, drive-throughs and all those kind of business model. So do you see that takeaway, especially as a category, picking up? Delivery obviously will pick up, but you see takeaway also as another option that restaurateurs will start exploring and driving through, or do you see any other business models coming through here?
Yes, deliveries will grow, takeaways as a model will grow. But when I mean asset light and low risk, let me take both of them separately. When I mean asset light, you need to think of businesses where your capital expenditure is reduced.
Right.
You need to look at different models now because there'll be first of all paucity of capital in the post-COVID era because I think recession is about to hit us. And also on the
Right.
other part, when I say low risk, what I meant is today our industry suffers from a very high proportion of fixed operating expenses. Move as many of them to variable as possible, because that is one sure shot way of de-risking your business. So as I said, lots of things will be reimagined. Look at something like a landlord and tenant relationship. It has to be recast. This is the time, because at the rentals at which India is working, it will never make sense for any restaurateur to operate in the times to come. So all these
Right.
rules need to be rewritten, and I'm not saying in favor of one or the other. It's to ensure that the businesses don't die.
Right.
It's not that I want one side to profiteer at the cost of other. I just want both sides to come together to make sure that businesses survive. And the same rule applies for every other relationship between people like you and us, the aggregators and the restaurants. We all
Right.
need to come out of our established benchmarks and think of a new normal. We all
Absolutely.
need to come to a new normal.
In
Hmm.
terms of, like, you mentioned the relationship between restaurateurs and aggregators. What I think, going forward, one of the most important things that we as a community will have to build back is the consumer confidence of actually going out and dining out and social dining out instances. So where
Hmm.
do you think can, aggregators like us as well as NRAI and the overall restaurant industry collaborate and come together to figure out, let's say, campaigns or steps that need to be taken so that consumers feel safe when they want to dine out, right? Or when they want to eat out. And this is happening globally in other countries. We are learning something from China, from the US. So, where do you think we can collaborate? And are there any initial thoughts in your mind where you think how we could work on this?
So I think, the roles that you and me can play in changing the consumer perception, in my view, is going to be a little marginal,
Right.
because eventually people are going to be guided by larger factors that's around us. If there are deaths which go beyond a few thousand in India, so I think psyche will change a lot. But I think where we can come together and change the contours of the business and consumer confidence is by changing the narrative that cheap is better.
Sure.
Discount cannot be the only narrative that can draw businesses, and that is something we need to do, because
Yeah.
end of the day it is not helping the business. During a boom, when you come up with something like this where you feel the consumption can be increased by these measures to a certain degree, there is still some kind of a logic in this. But in an era of depression or recession that we are going to go through, that could be very counterproductive.
Absolutely, absolutely. But the other thought, again, so to say, there are different types of people in this world, right? So if there are 100 people, everyone thinks differently, right? There has to be some sort of pushback or nudge for me as a consumer as to come back to the restaurant. So what is that going to be? Is that going to be hygiene? Is that going to be that social distancing is being practiced inside the restaurant? Is that going to be more around, technology? I'm pre-ordering my food so that I spend less time in the restaurant. So what are these steps or factors which will work in the consumer favor to at least get the first 40% people to go out? I'm sure the last 50% will be, going out much later, but there will still be that initial set who are more adventurous, who would want to venture out. So how do you kind of get them to actually, nudge and get them out there?
It has to be a combination of hygiene promise
Right.
and a promise that my processes are very kosher. And what I mean is, right from the time of processing or from receiving the goods to processing to plating to cooking, everything, that it is very kosher, because now everybody knows that touching a lift button can spread the virus.
Right.
People are
Right.
aware to that extent. And I'm talking because I had an experience with a kid in my building. I was going
Right.
down to pick up some essentials, and the kid said, "Sorry, you cannot touch like this. Pick up a toothpick and do it." So this is something which is going to happen across the board, and that confidence will not happen overnight. You said if
Yep.
40% adventurers will come in. I think if that happens, others will follow suit, because the remaining 60% will also consist of lots of fence sitters. But I
Right.
think the challenge will be to get the first 40%. And it
Right.
has to be
Right.
a combination of, it is only about confidence that where I am going to, I am safe, and I'm not risking me or my family to anything untoward. Otherwise, I think, it's going to be very tough.
And like going by the whole point which you mentioned, right, about transparency, about the process from the start to the end to build that thing, where do you think can technology play a role here to bring that transparency to the consumer? See, today when the consumer is sitting at his home, there is absolutely zero transparency, right?
I
So
agree.
where do you think, again, whether it is aggregators or restaurants' own technology or technology partners can bring in that transparency for you or build you or enable you to do an asset light model? What do you think will be the role of technology in enabling this consumer confidence at the end of the day?
No, technology is going to play a very, very vital part. And by saying that, I don't mean somebody putting a rating of a restaurant hygiene on their website.
Right,
I
right.
definitely don't mean that, because that we all know is has no meaning. I think where technology can play a role is because it has a reach. Technology gives you the reach to people to do symbolic things which tells people that I'm entering a right restaurant.
Mhm.
Somebody, I'm just throwing an idea onto the table. Somebody shooting a complete video of receiving process of seafood, for example, and saying how it is handled, how it is done, and you send out that video. It is about one product, but the confidence about that whole establishment goes up when people get to see this. So
Right.
I think technology has a very, very vital role to play in this. And second thing which I feel we need to do is, and this was something which was told to me by a bureaucrat, a very respected one at that, some months ago. He said, have you heard of something called Woolmark? I said,
Mhm.
I think I have seen it on some woolen clothing. He said, Woolmark has got nothing to do with the government. The manufacturers of woolen goods in Jalandhar, they were inundated with lots of fakes coming in. So they brought in their own sign called Woolmark, that only pure woolens will have the mark of Woolmark, and that became like a thing of deciding. It gave the confidence to the consumer. Woolmark hai, matlab cotton hai, wool hai. I think we need something similar for the restaurant by NRAI or other restaurant body which says this place is compliant, and that certificate should hold certain confidence, certain respect in the minds of the consumers. And I think these are the few things which can change the mood of the consumer, if I may say, because it's not only going to be hygiene which is going to hamper the consumption. I think the recession will also play a big role in consumption, deciding the levels of consumption going forward.
So, like a more enhanced version of the FSSAI stamp, is that what you're saying, or something even more than that?
No, this is FSSAI is, with due respect, it is little theoretical. This
Sure.
is this is something like, it's like an external agency which has
Sure.
been given a very practical rule book. Okay, this is what, and it is in pure terms. It is either there or not there. So, it's like a self-regulation,
Yep.
Sahil.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it has to be so good that people have the confidence. I'm entering this place. I know this is, a hygiene compliant place.
So another license for the restaurant then.
Not license, it's our self-regulation. In
I
fact, we should regulate to an extent that tomorrow you don't have to go, you can tell the government, we are regulating so well, I don't need your inspectors to come and check my hygiene. We are doing a better job.